Have you ever wondered what makes a good exercise? Well, that's exactly what you're going to learn in this video. Here's what we're going to cover. First, we'll talk about the 4 different ways that most people choose exercises. Hint, this is not how you should be choosing exercises. These 4 ways are bad. Then we'll talk about 6 criteria for better exercise selection. After all, there are a million different exercises for the core, for the back, for the chest, for the arms. So how do you choose which one to go with? I'll give you 6 criteria in this video. And finally, I'll tell you other variables that you need to know to put together an effective exercise program, because just exercises are not enough. Before we jump in, who am I? My name is Igor. I'm the author of 13 books on exercise and nutrition, including 4 Amazon bestsellers. As well, I've been a personal trainer since 2006, and I train other trainers in my methodology by speaking at personal training conferences since 2013. As well, I've done over 400 presentations to some of Canada's largest corporations, including IBM, Bosch, American Express, University of Toronto, Investors Group, and others. If you want to learn when I publish more videos about underrated and overrated exercises, click like and subscribe to my channel. So, how do most people choose exercises? Well, first of all, they have no plan. They walk into the gym, look around, see what's available, and go on that equipment. So there is 0 criteria over there, just what's available. Another criterion that they use for exercise selection is that an exercise works a muscle, but there are a million different exercises that work the same muscle. Why choose one over the other? Furthermore, does works a muscle necessarily mean strengthens a muscle? Just because it activates or contracts a muscle, does that mean it's effective? You'll learn about that in a few minutes. Now, another criterion that most people use is that it's difficult. Now, difficulty for the sake of difficulty doesn't make sense. Difficulty for the sake of effectiveness makes sense. So if it's difficult, but it doesn't bring you close to your goals, what's the point? Another criterion that most people use are, it's easy. The exact opposite of it's difficult. They think, well, I'm out of shape or I'm too old. I should do something gentle for myself. Well, difficulty is relative to your own abilities. What's difficult for one person may not be difficult for you, and vice versa. And so I wouldn't choose exercises based on difficulty or based on ease. Choose exercises based on effectiveness. And so if you're wondering, what is it that makes an exercise effective? Well, here are 6 criteria to help you choose. In no particular order. Criteria number 1 is safety. If an exercise bothers your joints, your wrists, your elbows, your shoulders, your knees, or your hips, is there an option to change handles, change grips, or change stances? In other words, can you make the exercise hard on the muscles, but easy on the joints? That's criteria number 1. Criteria number 2 is that there's tension through the full range of motion. And here's what I mean. If you're doing an exercise called triceps kickbacks, when the dumbbell is hanging straight down, there is no tension on the triceps. The triceps are basically at rest. There's also no tension when you go from your hip towards your, in this case, the right shoulder. So at least half of the exercise, there is 0 tension in there. There's really only tension in triceps kickbacks at the fully extended position. So only about 25 to 30 degrees out of 180 is there any tension on the muscle. Now that's not a good use of your time. How can you modify this exercise to give you tension throughout the full range? By changing the dumbbell to a cable. Cable changes the line of pull of gravity, which allows you to create tension on the muscle throughout the full range. So a cable triceps kickback is a better exercise than a dumbbell triceps kickback. It doesn't take any more time, but it is more effective. Criteria number 3 is that the full range of motion of the exercise matches the full range of motion of the muscle. Why do I make this distinction? Well, here's an example. Lunges are a very favorite exercise of lots of people, but the leg that's working primarily is the front leg. The back leg is not working very hard. It's working a little bit, but not that hard. But look at the angle of the front knee, in this case, the left knee. It's got more than a 90-degree angle, but the knee can bend all the way. And so the knee of the back leg hits the floor before the knee of the front leg reaches full flexion. So how can you modify this to make it more effective? you raise the floor. In other words, you do something called a split squat. Notice that in this exercise, there is a smaller angle between the shin and the thigh bone, thereby giving you a fuller range of motion. Again, we want the full range of motion of the exercise to be the full range of motion of the muscle. In this case, the glute and the quadriceps. Criteria number 4, terminal consistency. That is, there is a consistent starting point and ending point to each exercise. One example of an exercise with good terminal consistency is deadlifts. There is a concrete starting point, which is the floor, and a concrete ending point, which is when you're fully straight, when the bar is at your hips. An exercise with bad terminal consistency, an example would be a lateral raise. There is a consistent starting point, which is with your hands near your thighs, but there's no consistent ending point. In other words, some repetitions you might end at 90 degrees, others at 92 degrees, others at 85 degrees. And so there's no terminal consistency in lateral raises, but there is in deadlifts. Criteria number 5 is that the limiting factor is the target muscle. And I'll give you an example. Push-ups work the muscles of the chest, the front of the shoulder, and the back of the arm, that is the triceps. Now, a lot of people do push-ups with the goal of building up their chest muscles. And yet, you ask those same people, where do you feel push-ups? They might say in the triceps. In other words, if you're stopping the exercise because of the triceps and not because of the chest, well, it's not a chest exercise, it's a triceps exercise. You can modify this exercise by widening your hands, or you can choose a different exercise for the chest. But it sounds obvious, but the limiting factor should be the target muscle. In other words, you need to have a target muscle. Which muscle do you intend to work with a specific exercise? And then evaluate, am I fatiguing in that muscle more than other muscles? Okay. Criterion number 6 is that the resistance curve matches the strength curve. This might be the most complicated point in here, or the most complicated criterion, but let me explain something. Resistance curve refers to an exercise. Strength curve refers to a muscle. The resistance curve is where in an exercise is it easiest and most difficult. The strength curve is where is the muscle weakest and strongest. Here is what I mean. In chin-ups, the resistance curve is like this. It's easy from the bottom to 90 degrees, and then it gets more difficult as your chin gets over the bar. And so that's the resistance curve of that exercise. However, one way that a lot of people do chin-ups to make it easier, if they can't do a full chin-up yet, is they will wrap a band around the chin-up bar and attach that to their feet to help the band bring them out of the bottom position. But think about what happens when you do that. The more you stretch a band, the more resistance it provides. So it provides the most resistance when you are at the bottom position. But that's the position where you're strongest. You want the most assistance where you're weakest, not where you're strongest. But the band does the opposite. It provides you the most resistance, the most assistance where you're strongest and the least assistance where you're weakest, which is a reverse resistance and strength curve. So that's not a good example of an exercise that meets that criteria. But here is a good example. So the overhead press, the most difficult part of an overhead press is at the bottom. This is the hardest part. The easiest part is at the top. Now, with dumbbells, you have the same resistance from the bottom to the top. So that's not bad, but it could be made better. If you change dumbbells to resistance bands, there you have a perfect match between the resistance curve and the strength curve. At the bottom, the resistance band provides you the least resistance, where you're weakest, which is perfect. And as you get stronger, it provides more and more resistance. So you might get 15 pounds of tension here, and then 25 pounds of tension here, where you can actually handle it. So you don't need to have all 6 of these criteria for one exercise, but as long as you have 3 or 4 out of 6, you know that you're maximizing the value of your time. Now, you know the criteria for exercise selection, but exercise selection is not enough to create an effective program. You also need to know other variables like how many days per week should you exercise, how much weight should you lift, how to progress, how do you get to heavier weights or more repetitions or more sets? What is the appropriate progression? How many sets per exercise should you do? How many repetitions per exercise should you do? And if you want to know all these variables, I cover them extensively in my video on the 2 key muscle building factors. If you're interested in that, either click on the link in the description below or on your screen right now.